There you go. Now it's happening. Um, the one that I looked at, I've forgotten his name. I very carefully wrote down all the points. Oh, that's good. Look at that. Oh, I very carefully wrote those down, but not his name. I thought it was okay. This is the one where he's a talking head, though, and I'm not a big fan of these talking head ones. But he talked about the top 10 things he'd learned, the good things.
Best beginner advice for landscape. I think.
Hang on, let me just have a look what it was called.
I think you're right, Bob.
Oh, best advice, yeah. Best advice for beginners. That's the one I was thinking of, and I still don't remember his name. But you obviously watched it, Bob. What did you think?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I think there was some good things in best advice and the worst things also. I looked at all of them. The number one was enjoy the overall process, slow down. And it's typical of me. I just go and do it and then I'm done. And like get there early. You can get some good shots before, the best, sunrise. If you go early, you can sometimes get some better shots than, by just slow down, enjoy the process. And like I submitted, typical of me, I submitted a photo for the challenge, which is until I think the 28th. So slow down was appropriate for me. Anyway, I thought it was good. There was a lot of good things in there.
Yeah, I really, there were a lot that were really good. There were a couple that made me go, huh, but we'll talk about those in due course. But I thought there was a lot in here that was really, really good. The one that really hit me was when he was talking about how the folks who you follow or you take notice of often, they always seem to get the perfect photograph. And I think I suffered from that for a long time. It was like, how the hell do they do this stuff? And the rest of the points that he talks to, I think, are really important around that, because it doesn't just happen. It's a whole combination of many of the things that he talked about here. But I thought it was an okay session. I'm not a fan of talking heads. I find those, although the beauty of a video that's a talking head is you can do something else while you're listening to it. Right. Anybody else? Any other thoughts?
I thought the English fellow was pretty good. He looked terribly cold. Did you see that one? He was taking pictures of a pier.
Oh, I missed that one.
That might have come earlier.
Oh, no, I didn't see that one at all.
Yeah, it was about 18 minutes, and he had a Canon, and he was shooting out to the pier. It was a typical English day, gray, and more gray. But he seemed.
Where you're from, you'd be very careful here.
It was one of the ones Bill had sent, and I just looked at that after having reviewed what Bob was talking about, and he was a very interesting fellow. I mean, I felt sorry for him because he had those thermal gloves on with the fingertips exposed and had his hat pulled down, and he looked terribly cold. I felt so sorry for him, and then he was standing in water in his boots, and I just said, "Oh, this is not where I want to be." But it was just sort of interesting because you could see, I don't know how he did this, but you could see the window behind right in his camera. So you saw exactly where he was shooting. He was shooting raw, first of all, and he was shooting at about 11, and he was trying, and then he wanted to change the composition a little bit, and he changed the f-stop, and you could just see all that right in front of you. And I thought that was perfect because that's the screen you really want to see, not the head talking, but the actual photographer.
He photographed the back of the live view screen as he was doing it.
Correct. And that's what made it very interesting, because you could just, Now he had a lot more sophisticated. He had one thing I've never seen before. He had a horizon bar across his. Are you familiar with that?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I don't have that, but you could tell exactly where he was. I mean, he wasn't going to make a horizon mistake.
We're going to buy one of those for Mark Herberth and give it to him for Christmas. Sorry, Mark. Yeah, they're quite useful. My little camera has one on. The older 5D, I don't think did, but they can be quite useful.
Yeah, so go back to Bill's earlier emails and you might find it. It's I thought it was very interesting. I just felt sorry for the chap.
For us.
Do you remember the name of the video?
Well, you see, that's another thing I have a problem with.
Was this the one with the guy on the bicycle? Where to focus?
Mm.
Oh,
Couldn't have
that
been
was-
it.
That's the one I sent. No.
This is the guy who set up his tripod on the beach. Well,
Yeah, either of those.
English beach. In other words, all rocks. And he set up his tripod on the rock.
Helping yourself here, you know.
And then he brought in the image. It was a pier that sat off into the distance. He called it a minimalist shot, which I thought that was interesting,
Oh,
based on our videos that we've seen on minimalism. But he had it was basically the top third of the frame. He had the top third of the frame was the pier going out into kind of like a gray, misty environment with gray sky and water, which was sort of grayish. It was interesting the way he showed it in many forms, using primarily he was shooting it about 100, and then he was just kept on adjusting the f-stop. But I really enjoyed seeing what he was doing behind the camera, and also learned the last time we were talking that he was shooting in RAW, not JPEG and RAW, but just RAW. And obviously he was going to do post-production on that, and that was interesting. So I'm going to start shooting in RAW and see what happens on my landscape,
Yay.
wherever that may be.
well, be ready for a dip. You get the disappointment dip when you start doing something new, you know, when you look at the stuff and you go, oh my God, really? But stick with it. I thought that was an unusual one, you know, on this guy's list. Number 6 was shoot raw. And I liked his rationale is that you are forced to then assess your pictures. And for me, I've done it now. I've shot raw for about 20 years, and it would be rare for me not to shoot raw. But I needed persuading. This was a group of photographers who were shooting at night on the San Francisco Bay, and they all chided me. They gave me such a hard time that I ended up shooting raw. And as they say, I've never looked back.
The new iPhones, you can set to always shoot raw.
Right.
Which I recently figured out. So that's kind of cool.
It's good stuff. You know, it's a lot of use to it, I think.
So the big thing with RAW is that you're going to have to edit to get a better picture, but you can get a better picture if you shoot RAW, theoretically.
Yeah. Oh, you have a lot more room for doing things. I mean, the interesting thing is he talked about, well, you have to edit RAW. RAW is like an undeveloped film. You can't do anything with it. You can't actually look at a RAW negative, you know, on your, if you're on a mic, you press space and it shows it. You can't do that. So you have to import it in order to get it converted into pixels. So yeah, and that, you know, depending on your point of view, is either a pain in the backside or it gives you a lot more room for maneuver. Personally, I'm a fan, but then again, I've spent many years of painting learning Lightroom. So, but I like that. So if you, Larry, if you like the guy in England, one of the photographers that I've been following, both on Facebook, but more particularly on YouTube, is a guy called Simon Baxter. And I would recommend checking out his YouTube videos. a Yorkshireman, so that's a good thing. Or I assume he's a Yorkshireman. He might just be from Durham, but he's on the northern edge of the North Yorkshire moors. And the reason I like him is, see, I did a lot of photography, as you all know, on the West Coast, and there it's big vistas. And then I come to the East Coast and I go, okay. So it's a very different form of seeing, in my experience. And I've been struggling with that to get what I'd regard as really good landscapes. And this guy shoots woodlands, and he goes in and he does woodland shots. I thought, I like him, and I like his style, and his photographs are excellent. And I thought, maybe I can apply some of this in North Carolina. So we have Duke Forest and places, you were talking about the ice cream place. To the east of there's a huge amount of Duke Forest land that's accessible. There's no parking, but it is accessible. And I did a bit of wandering around there, and I need to motivate myself to do more, really. But so that's what I've tried to focus on. And the other person I'd highly, highly, highly recommend is Charlotte Gibb. What's her? I forgot what her married name is. Charlotte Gibb. Blah, blah. Check out Charlotte Gibb. She'll come up, and she does what she calls intimate landscapes. So she's a fabulous photographer. She's another Californian, and she's really nice. She's great. She's a good photographer. And she's, since she retired, they sold their business maybe 2 years ago, and she's just gone more or less full-time photography. And so she's good. The other Californian I'd highly recommend for landscapes is Michael Fry. And Michael has a number of tutorials online, some of which are free, many of which are free, some of which are paid for. But Michael's another good guy. But he's more of the big vista guy. Whereas Charlotte is really into Hamilton. What the hell's her name? It's a devil when you get old. I don't know what you guys are going to do when you get old, but I can't remember a bloody thing. So I would check those guys out and see which one works for you, but find somebody whose style you appreciate, and then I would say, dig into their work and see how they do it and why they do it.
It's just under Charlotte Gibb.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks.
And the Michael's last name, is that F-L-Y? Is that what you were saying?
Fry, F-R-Y-E, I think. I think he has an E on. It's either F-R-Y or F-R-Y-E.
Okay. Thank you.
I think one of the things we were saying before you got on, Graham, is, shooting landscapes around here, it is kind of, I guess, a challenge, because there's, what are you shooting?
It is, well, it is for me. That's really what I was alluding to. I mean, and even when you go up to the Smokies, I mean, I like the layered palette of, the different colors and the different layers of the mountains and so on. But it's like, okay, how many variations on this can I do? I have a friend who's coming out to shoot in the Smokies. Actually, Charlotte comes out and does classes in the Smokies, but usually in spring. And Richard Valenti's coming out. I don't know whether you can find him online or not, but he doesn't do classes or anything, but he and I used to shoot together quite a lot. His work is just spectacular. He and Charlotte are probably the top two from that group I used to be in. And I might go there, but the problem with the Smokies from here is, to me, everything's on the Tennessee side, where you want to go. The interesting stuff is on the Tennessee side. And I might go and try Cades Cove. That's what I was trying to think of. Has anybody shot there?
Good area, yeah.
You like it?
Yeah, and you see, well, we have deer here, but you usually see deer running around there.
Oh, I'd have no bloody problem when the little buggers are eating my pollinator garden out here.
Yeah, they're everywhere. Deer and rabbits.
Mhm.
Yep.
Well, Graham, I'd love to see some of your work on your landscapes.
Well, there's some stuff on Flickr, isn't there? I'm sure there's some stuff on Flickr. There's some old stuff on there. I've been clearing it out progressively because there's stuff that I look at now and I go, really? You put it up there? So I'm pretty sure there'll be some stuff up there. I used to shoot a lot around Yosemite. Yosemite is one of my favorite,
Oh,
and in the Sierra. So we used to do that. But I think there's a fair bit of landscape stuff up there. I haven't actually looked at what I did. I did a big clear out, and then I noticed a couple of weeks ago there's still like 5 million horse racing. I went horse racing to watch horse racing once in my entire life. If you look at Flickr, you would think that was all I did. So I got to clear some of that out. But no, the majority of the stuff that I did, I did a lot of people photography, and I did a lot of landscape photography. So for me, I'm struggling with learning to look around here again. So that tree stuff might work. And I like going to places like Jordan Lake, but they're all a little iconic. You know what I mean? I mean, no matter where you go on Jordan Lake, it's like, okay, so this view of Jordan Lake looks much like that one. And I've been struggling to find ways to take, I mean, you can take decent photos, but it's like, okay, so what am I trying to say about this stuff, and how is my work building on what's gone before? And so I've actually been having a challenge with some of that, and hence I actually haven't done much photography since we've been here. So when you say you want to see my work, most of it's older stuff. I've done some. You've seen some of the stuff that I've done, which is much more on the, intimate landscapes, like the rocks and the trees and so on. And I've also tried to use my iPhone a bit more, but mine's quite an old one now. So, and I'm not good with an iPhone. I really struggle to take good photos with an iPhone. But so those are the challenges that I've been facing. But I really like some of the things that he had to say about planning and research. So those are the sorts of things, the planning and the research, that take your time and think about it. I think are really good, because we all often try to be, get there, press the button and go again. And if you stop, that's why I like a tripod, actually, because it slows you down. The tripod forces you to slow down. And for me, I rarely go without the tripod now. Where did I go the other week? I actually did something the other week. It's going, hey, that's it.
so Graham, I sent a video to Bill that was posted. I gather you haven't looked at. I think it's Thomas Heaton, I think is the photographer. I think he's British. And it was about photographing boring landscapes.
Yeah. I actually saw the note on that. I haven't looked
He
at it.
rides on his bicycle and takes a 10-mile bike, and he's
I saw that.
forces himself to go, because he usually does seascapes and beautiful things. And I thought that was because I thought of us, we have sort of good landscapes, so we don't have Yosemite here.
I thought that was one of the best.
Oh, okay. I know I've got that. I didn't get a chance to look at it.
Look at it, see what you think.
I've been doing a lot of
To me, the interesting part in that, I saw that too, was, he tried to take a picture every mile for 10 miles. And you got to really force yourself to find something good. But it's a good process. I think that for me, I have trouble finding good things, but part of it is be a minimalist if you want, there's some options, but it was good.
He also talked about abstraction as a way around photographing what you might call boring landscapes. Although I don't think we have a boring landscape, but I understand what he's talking about. But something else I noticed in his video was how he really seldom used what you would call landscape format. He shot all of his landscapes in a square format, which sounds almost contradictory, but I thought it was very interesting. And he also, I think a few weeks ago, someone talked about the advisability of putting a person or something in the landscape to gauge scale. And one of the things that he did really well was put an object, in almost always a vertical object, in a horizontal field, where there were agricultural fields, to get variety and scale. I
Interesting.
thought those were two interesting things.
Yeah.
But the idea of using a square format to shoot landscape successfully, I thought was interesting.
Well, there
I
was-
was surprised by the one of the videos talked about using portrait for landscapes, and that intrigued me because it just seems perhaps it would work better here for us than landscape.
It can. It can. But the other thing is, if you're shooting panoramas, you almost certainly want to be shooting in portrait mode, because you've got maximum resolution on that long edge, and then when you stitch it, you know, that works really well. But you can do a lot.
Oh, say it again now, Graham.
Well, if you're doing a panorama, you almost certainly want to turn your camera into portrait mode, because you got more resolution on the long edge than the short edge.
I see. Okay.
Pixels this way. So, I mean, those are all things to play with. The one that I liked, the getting late, the staying late. I talked about Richard Valenti and Michael Fry a few minutes ago. We shot, I think it might have been Michael who ran this competition to take a picture in Yosemite on the 9th of November. And it turned out Michael was there at Tunnel View, and Richard and I were there. It turned out that half the people I knew in the photography world were at Tunnel View that morning, but most packed up. It started to rain a little, and most packed up and went somewhere else. And Richard and I stayed. He took a prize-winning Nikon picture that morning. So Richard's take is he does all his prize-winning pictures when he's photographing with me, and I never get them. So that was the thing about stay late. And the light often goes really nice after everybody's packed up and gone. It's really, I find it, you know, you have to be really conscious about not being influenced by the crowd. So the crowd will often move off, or they'll be in one position or looking one way. And you have to force yourself to step outside of that and really be maybe contrarian. And then you can stay and you get that really nice light sometimes you don't. But that planning and that turnaround, I really like too.
Is Tunnel View at Yosemite?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I was there. Yeah.
Yep. It's the one where you look and Bridal Veil's in front of you and El Cap's.
El Cap and yeah.
Half Dome's way off in there.
Also, yeah. Yeah, that's a great spot.
Yep. Well, there is Old Tunnel View, which you have to climb up a mountain from, which is even better. Tunnel View's popular because everybody
goes there.
It's a Charlie Kramer is, if I have to walk more than 100 yards, I'm not taking a photograph. So that's a Charlie Kramer spot where you can get the car. Yeah, so the ones that I particularly like would take more photos, which, you know, Bill's been pushing, stand in front of more interesting things and take more pictures. The late and the early turnaround, the perspective thing, it can work. It depends where you are, and it depends what technique that you're using. But the plan and the research, I think that's 9/10 of the battle, because then you know what you're going for and you know what you're going to do. And the one that he didn't mention that I always harp on about is knowing your instrument. You need to know your machine, which is hard. You know, there are still things on these cameras that I find today, and I go, or I'll change it somehow, and then I can't remember how to reset it to where I had it. I forgot what I was doing recently, and I had I tried to put it on the rig to drive it to do macro photography. I could not get it back set up. I could not find how to move the focus point to where I wanted. It didn't do what I wanted. There was some setting somewhere that I missed. So they're a bit of a nightmare, really, but get the basics down and then start to learn your instrument. So the other one that I haven't seen any of these landscape guys do is making the point about finding the sweet spot for your lens. Because landscape photographers, they always say to you, you know, the push is, oh, just go to f22 or 32 or 64 or whatever you can. Get the smallest aperture you can to get the greatest depth of field, which is not bad advice in some circumstances, but your lens usually performs better somewhere in the middle of that aperture range. And so, you know, a couple of years,
What do you mean performance better?
it's sharper.
Okay.
It's sharper. And the other thing that starts to happen is that
Why is the middle sharper than the smallest aperture?
well, there are two things really. One is the design of the lenses. And if you look at the lens chart, you can see the fall off in sharpness. And the other thing that starts to happen that becomes apparent is that you do get more depth of field, but you also get diffusion. And the diffusion is where the red, the green, and the blue light aren't focused in exactly the same point. So you will get aberration, you'll get fringing, and you'll get diffusion. So it's worth playing around with. And usually somewhere around f11, f16 on a wide lens, on a lens with a small aperture, is often where you get the best results. So, you know, one of the things you can do is go out with your tripod and you can take things at different apertures. So it's worth doing different apertures and different ISOs just to see what type of results you get. And if you're shooting in RAW and you pull them into your whatever processing you prefer, then you can look at them side by side, and it's often subtle. And people used to say to me when I, you know, was still struggling with a lot of this stuff, well, it's obvious that that one's better than that one. And yet I'd go, really? What are you saying that I'm not? And so there's a lesson there about learning to see. There's a learning to see in the field about what sort of composition you want. And then there's a learning, you know, when they started talking about chromatic aberration, it took me a long time to be able to spot it and work out how to remove it. So that, you know, there is a huge amount of learning from the technical side if that's something that appeals to you. And a lot of that comes with RAW and learning your instrument. So,
You know, what happened was unfortunately, there was a video that got sent out about trying to find the spot where you should put your camera. But personally, I looked at it twice and I still couldn't figure out why or what he was saying. And it was kind of frustrating because I kept looking at it thinking, why did he pick that? And he said something about a third of the way. I don't know if that was just, is that always?
He's talking about focusing into the frame, I think.
Yeah, what is that? Does that say something?
Well, it can. So there's this whole stuff on hyperfocal distance, which I can never remember, and I have to go and look up every time. So there is a point where you can focus that gives you maximum sharpness from front to back. And in general, if you're working on a landscape, so if you don't want to do focal stacking, or you're not going to do focal stacking, the question is, where do you focus in the frame? And again, if you focus on infinity, you really need a chart to work out what the closest point that would be in focus in an image would be. Whereas if you go the other way and you say, well, if I focus a third of the way into the frame, then you know that that's going to be sharp. And in general, depth of field works like this. If you focus here, 1/3 of the amount of that focus is in front of the point of focus and 2/3 are behind. In general, that's a broad generalization. So whatever point you
say that again, say that again.
So let's assume you have a depth of field of 3 feet for the sake of argument. This is not to just make it easy to do the sums. If you focus 1/3 into that frame, you're focused at a point here, then 1 foot will be sharp in front of it and 2 feet behind it, the focus point. So that's always worth bearing in mind, that depth of field, depth of focus comes forward of your focus point as well as behind. And that ratio is a broad generalization. that it's a third in front of where you're focusing and 2/3 behind. So Susan, when they talk about focusing a third of the way into the frame, that's really what they're starting to hint at, is that instead of just focusing on infinity, which is going to go as far as the lens can, you're really telling your instrument to come forward a bit. And I want the emphasis to be here, a third of the way into the frame. Then the stuff behind is generally sharp, because the stuff that's a long way away, you're not really looking for the ultimate in sharpness. So that, I think, is the point that they were trying to make. So it's a good thing to do. Go and try it. Again, you can do this with you don't need to have big vistas. Go and focus at different points, particularly if you have, you know, something that makes it really easy to point on the screen. Pick some, if you're doing it with trees are really easy, because then you can pick a tree that you want to be the one for your focus point, and you can change it throughout your image. And then again, bring them home, put them on a screen, and look at the difference in impact that each of those images have, whether it's focused closer to you or you're focusing way, way, way away. It's good to play. You know, you can do a lot of this stuff in your front yard or your backyard, or, you know, I used to, because I lived in an urban area. I lived in Oakland in California for many years. One of the things I used to do with my students was you had to step outside your door and then take 10 different photographs, meaningful photographs, without moving from that position. And that forces, these are really exercises in forcing you to think creatively. Same as the stuff we do with colors and so on. Now you've all gone quiet.
So,
Well, that's good info.
Lynn?
I have a question. I was watching a video about using a tripod and having an L bracket on your camera so that you could switch from horizontal to vertical without having to readjust everything. Have you used one of those?
Yeah, I have one sitting here somewhere, strangely enough, that I tried to sell, and they offered me a derisory amount of money for it. And I thought, I'm a Yorkshireman, so I don't sod it, I'll keep it, even though I don't have a camera for it anymore. They are inordinately expensive, good ones.
Okay.
So there are really two big companies that do this stuff well. One is called Really Right Stuff, where you've sold not only your children, but your grandchildren to buy them. And then what's the other one called? Kirk. I love Really Right Stuff's gear, but the new owners who bought it, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, I don't agree with some of their political stances, so I tend not to spend money with them. I've used Kirk. Really Right Stuff is probably the best gear you can get on the planet. And I noticed everybody you see videos has Really Right Stuff gear. The ball heads and the clamping brackets, that clamping bracket, I think, is exclusively from Really Right Stuff. And I love those. They're good, but they are inordinately expensive. That medium-sized ball head, I think, is $500+. So
Okay.
not cheap stuff. But if you want to put it in perspective, the one that Simon Baxter uses, which is not a Really Right Stuff one, is nearly $2,000 just for the head.
Whoa. Okay.
So yeah, L brackets I like. It's much better than trying to tip your, you know, you've usually got a slot in the ball head so you can turn it. I've never found those to work very well. I find them awkward. And particularly if you're trying to do something like a panorama where you want to move it X degrees, you know, usually if you've tipped it into that little side hole on the ball head, you get so far and then you find it's jamming on one of the tripod legs or something. So an L bracket is fabulous. And in days of yore, I always had an L bracket on every camera that I owned. Problem now is that nobody makes a good one for the EOS M. I have probably about 6 or 8 around, none of which I put on the camera because they're all awful. Usually they block the battery compartment, or you can't change the card or something. You know, you can't get the release in. And the stuff that I've got was cheap stuff. I couldn't find an expensive one for the EOS M. So yes, I like them, and particularly if you're doing portrait work. It's also useful in the studio, by the way. If you start doing portraits of your grandkids or anybody, those are the sort of things that look expensive, and you wonder why it's such a. I did anyway. You know, why is such a big deal about them? Once you've used them, you really struggle when they go away. So,
Okay.
yeah, which camera have you got, Lynn?
I have a Sony A7 III.
You'll find plenty of them for that. And I would look on eBay and find a used one, eBay or Amazon, and find a used one. Because these are the sorts of things that, you know, it's really hard to destroy them. And if they've got a few dings on them, generally that doesn't matter. And used ones, I mean, I forget what I paid for the one for the 5D3. Probably upwards of a couple of $100. And I think the best offer I got on eBay was $30. And I was like, so I went away grumpily, and it's still somewhere around here. So yeah, I'd rather donate stuff than sell it for stupid money. So yeah, definitely I would get one. And if anybody's serious, the other thing that I have on my tripod, which was, this was the innovation of all time. I have a head. So irrespective of which ball head you've got, the top of the tripod usually has a flat plane like this, yeah? And at the bottom, instead of that being fixed, at the bottom there's a little control that you loosen, and then you can tip this, and it goes all the way around, and it'll move about that much. So instead of fiddling to get your tripod legs level, you level this head, it's got a spirit level on it, and then you can do whatever you like. And that is a Manfrotto, and it's called a leveling head. And I don't know anybody else who does one. And it is, if you're serious about doing landscape work, or, you know, work where you want to use a tripod and being level is important, like doing panoramas, that was the best thing since sliced bread. And it wasn't that expensive, and it replaces the existing center column in your tripod. Definitely one of the best things I've ever had.
So, Graham, I have a couple questions for you. Yeah, going back to your talking about focusing into the frame. If you say, let's say you're on the side of a hill and you're focusing down into the valley, where is 1/3? How and you've got nothing between you and the village below. Where is 1/3? How do you find 1/3?
Well, in that circumstance, it doesn't make any difference, does it? Because you don't have anything on which to focus.
Okay.
So, but usually you do. Usually you want, you know, you're not usually seeing just something that's a long way away. And if it was important, then what I would do. So again, one of the other things that I do, and I know we've talked about it a few times now, is back button focus. So I disconnect focus and shutter on the front of the camera. I don't have my camera here. But usually when you press your shutter button on the camera, the first thing it does is does the autofocus for you. So it'll go, or however smart it is. It'll pick a point of focus that either you selected or it thought that you ought to have selected. And then when you press it beyond halfway, then it opens the shutter and makes the exposure. I remove that ability to autofocus, and I put it on a button on the back of the camera. So everybody who picks my camera up goes, it's not focusing. Well, no, it doesn't, because I press the little star button on the back of a Canon, which is the top right-hand side corner. That is where I put the focus on all my cameras. And then a number of benefits come from that. Number one is I can focus once. So this, coming back to your point, Tom, if the thing that I want is not easy to focus on in the frame, what I will do is use my center focus point focus on the thing that I want to focus and then reframe.
Mm.
Even if I'm on a tripod, I will do that. And because I've put the focus on the back button, it doesn't matter how many times I press the shutter button, the focus point has not moved. It's focused in that same place. Again, if you're doing things like panoramas or focus stacking, you want these things. You don't want, well, let's take panoramas to start. You want a single focus point and a single manual exposure so that every frame is the same. The focus point in every frame is the same, irrespective, Tom, on whether there's anything in the frame or not. Yeah, so these are all fiddly little things. But to come back, if you've got something in the frame, then nowadays, many cameras, you can just touch the item on the live view screen and choose that as your focus point. But if you can't do that, you usually have a joystick to drive it around. And sometimes they don't fall exactly. So you do have to do that reframing bit. But again, I just choose something that's appropriate. It's like, if you're not sure what your perfect exposure is, focus on something gray on the road.
Like we did in film.
In what?
Film, when we were shooting film.
Oh, most of the techniques that we're using nowadays are no different. The basic techniques and principles are no different than we did shooting film. And we did that because we wanted it in zone 5. We want to know where zone 5 is, which is the middle gray, which is exactly where the exposure meter on your camera is going to try and make all your exposures. It's going to try and make it middle gray.
Gray card.
Gray card, yep. How much light does a gray card reflect?
17%.
Close, 80. I was taught 18 anyway, but
I've still got my gray card somewhere.
Yep. Well, again, once you get, I used to carry a white, a black, and a gray, and then once you know this trick of focusing on something that's on the road, who cares? I never carry any of that stuff now. I probably still have it in little boxes. I've had so many gizmos and gadgets that I don't carry around anymore. You said you had a couple of questions, Tom.
Yeah, let's see. And you've talked about panorama several times. So there seems to be 2 ways that a person can do panoramas with a modern camera. One is to set the camera into panorama and move the camera from left, let's say left to right, and the camera provides you with a finished product as a panorama. The other way seems to be to take several photographs and then stitch them together, and I assume stitching is done in post-processing.
Yeah.
So which is preferable and why?
Jodie takes panoramas by the dozen with her iPhone. She carries her iPhone. I sold all the cameras that were on her shelf that she promised she would definitely use if I gave her them. And then they sat there. I think there might still be one there, but that's about it. She uses her iPhone, and the results are, it depends on what you're trying to do, but for what she wants, which are memory shots, grandkids, memories. It's telling me I have to do something. Let's go away. Thank you. Then I think things are like that. Now, if you want to do, there is a huge panorama of Town House here that was done in the Lake District. If you want
that
to
was the sky, Graham. That was the sky.
Yeah, it was. It is. You can't see it here, but it is on Flickr, I do believe. And actually, it's the background on my Facebook page. So if you see me on Facebook, that's the one. It's the header at the top. That one was not only many photographs done in portrait mode, they were also bracketed. It's an HDR panorama, which if you want to cause yourself a lot of frustration, that's a great thing to go and try and do. Because you have to work out not only which order to take them in, but also how to assemble it afterwards. But again, it depends on what you're trying to do, Tom. I mean, for Jodie, yeah, she does panoramas all the time and she loves the iPhone. If we're just doing a quick snapshot or something like that, yep. If I was up in the Smokies doing serious panorama work, I would use my little camera and I'd have it on a tripod and I would shoot at 15-degree increments all the way around. And I'd probably shoot HDR. I overshoot. I try to overshoot so that.
What is it about the stitching process that makes it superior to what you're calling iPhone?
Well, it depends what you want to do. I mean, you can't. It's really hard to take an iPhone one and print it big, for example.
Okay.
You can't on an iPhone do panorama and HDR, for example.
Well, on a really good camera like you have, you can't do that trick of shooting a panorama with by moving the camera across?
Mine doesn't have that facility. I don't know many DSLRs that do.
Oh, okay.
I've seen it on iPhones. I've not seen it. It may exist on other point and shoots or DSLRs, but I haven't seen it. I just use an EOS M. You know, I use the little.
I see. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So there is a panorama setting on the iPhone?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
And Tom, it doesn't work right to left. It won't go right to left. It makes you go left to right, which is really interesting. But the other thing to do with your iPhone is try doing a vertical panorama. See, there are things you can do to play.
Yeah, I've done that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, there's lots of stuff to play with. It's so what else about this? About this, you know, what are your other questions around Lynn?
So lenses. So I just have the kit lens that came with my camera. It's 24-70 or something. So I'm not sure that's great for landscapes.
It's okay. Is it a full frame? You're a Sony, right?
It's a full frame.
Full frame?
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with it. And if you've got it, you've got it. So I used to carry three lenses was my basic kit. I had a wide angle, and I think it was I was trying to remember this the other week, and I bought it because it was cheap. You know, they all go mad on the Canons on the 24-70, but it was like an arm and a leg for that lens. And so I forget what I paid. I paid $400 used. And I think it was a 40mm. It might have been 35. And that was a great lens. And I had that. And then my walk around lens was a 24-105, the standard Canon mid-range, which is a fabulous lens. These were all L lenses. So that's, number one is buy the quality lens. And then I carried a 70-200 with a couple of converters. And the 70-200 was, we talked about this, I think, in the last one. It was a 2.8 left, 2.8 lens. It was heavy. It was extremely heavy. And I would not do that now. So now I carry I have maybe 3 lenses in the camera bag, but they're all small. And I keep looking at the new Canon R series because that seems to be where they're going. They're going to abandon the camera that I've got, I think. And the R series look quite nice, but the lenses are eye-wateringly expensive. And I do mean eye-watering. They're all well over $1,000, I think. So for me, there was some form of ultra-wide angle. There's that medium range zoom. So 24-105 is the Canon range. So 24-70 is a little shorter than that, but not much. And then I had a 200mm with a multiplier. But usually for landscape work, I didn't use more than the 200mm. So 70-200 is good. And that's it. So I rarely used anything other than those. I'm trying to think. Did I ever use anything other than those? Oh, I had a 100 to 400 as well that I would occasionally take. That was primarily for aviation photography, but I did use it for landscapes sometimes. But then I got increasingly fed up of lugging around all this gear. It's too heavy.
Yeah.
I have a question because one of the lenses that that guy gave those 10 lessons, and also he talked about it in the lens, was a 16 to 35 millimeter wide. So which of your lenses is comparable, or is that something? Can you explain that a little bit?
I'm not a fan of ultra wide lenses for landscape photography. So it's David Munch who did all this stuff of putting something big in the foreground and using an ultra wide lens. It's okay. I thought that guy, the video that we looked at last time, did a really, really good job where he put the camera, do you remember this one? He photographed the trees and you saw how the trees moved in relation. And I thought that was one of the best illustrations I've ever seen. Wide angle's okay. David Munch was a big advocate of that, and you see everybody doing it, of having a rock or a puddle in the foreground. Actually, Jim Kopnick who's an aviation photographer from Oshkosh, Wisconsin, put a superb shot up this week, and his title was "Always Carry a Bottle of Water with You," and it was a cinema at night in Chicago. And what he'd done was he'd seen this and he'd thought, that's a bit ordinary. There was a manhole cover in the middle of the road. So he poured his water bottle into it and shot it as a reflection. It was spectacular. And that comes back. Sorry, it's a really long answer, Susan, to what you asked. I think you need to play. So you can have, I would go with a starting point, rent lenses, see whether you like them or not. Buy the best glass that you can. That can make a huge difference to your photography. So on the Canon shooters, you will see they almost always have lenses with that little red line around the end of the lens, which tells you it's an L, which is the good quality glass. But they're a lot more money, so you come back to how much do you want to spend on this stuff. L lens is definitely worthwhile to me. That's my experience of them.
So are you saying, okay, let me see if I understand this right, because he did do those shots. So the 16 to 35 is what's called ultra wide, and you're saying that enables you to do that thing where you have something close up, focusing on that, and then doing the distance. Is that the capability it provides?
Yeah, it can. Yeah, I mean, remember that illustration of how it used and to me, I'm not a big fan of ultra wide photography. It's whatever floats your boat. To me, landscapes, you can do that. So what am I trying to say here?
Yeah, if you could explain, I don't exactly understand what the ultra wide does, where the other what makes it different when you look at a landscape. I guess that's what
you watch that video with the trees.
Yeah.
So that's it. I mean, that's it. If you're doing an ultra wide, you're effectively saying, I don't care about anything except the foreground. This is Graham talking, yeah? And they're okay to do once in a while. The problem is they become a vogue and everybody does nothing but those. And it's okay. I don't mind that. And I've done wide angle photographs where you're focused on, something really close to you. And you can see that, but it's not my way of doing landscape photography. So in my view, all these folks who are arguing for ultra wide lenses, it's a corner case. You use them once in a while. To me, I rarely shot. So on that 24 to 105, if I was doing landscapes, I was rarely shooting even at 24. But again, this stuff's all personal. If it works for you, do it. But it's not my style, not for every photograph. I want more variation than that. And the other thing that, the purists will argue to you is prime lenses are everything. Well, they are, but they're also bloody inconvenient. So I like zoom lenses, and you can get good quality zoom lenses nowadays. But you know, people have different views. Anything else?
No.
So the key is go and practice, huh?
Sorry, I was muted. I was at the beach recently and shot a bunch of stuff. I guess you would call them seascapes. And somebody in the group we were staying with was photographing his kids in the beach was unusually flat, so there was a long glide path for the receding waves that are extremely reflective.
Yep.
And it was around dusk, and he was shooting his child as she was walking through in the backwash, or whatever you want to call that.
Mhm.
And he was on an iPhone, and he had the camera maybe dangerously close to that water, like 2 inches above the water,
Right.
and then shot the picture of his child, and they were really beautiful. And I tried it a few times, and it was very interesting. So that's something I learned. Get low if you're at the beach.
Oh yeah.
Try getting low.
Well, one of his points on this list was not every picture is from 5 feet, you know, and that's true whether you're on a tripod or not. By the way, most of us stand up and shoot from eye level, so it's worth it. It's definitely get a different perspective.
Yeah, my camera has a tilt window, a tilt screen,
Yep.
and so I can put it way up over my head and tilt the thing down and still see what I'm shooting. I don't know whether the good cameras have that or not.
All good ways to make a picture with different impacts.
Anyway, that's just something I learned.
All right. Good. How are we doing? No? Well, anything else for folks? Or from folks?
Is there anything that would be particularly useful for us to send in the way of for discussion in the challenge? I was going to send in two photographs, just any two.
Well, you know, you're the image maker.
Yeah.
Do what works for you.
Mm-hmm.
That's always the God, you know. It's always the golden rule. Do what works for you. If it gets you in, gets you out, gets you making images, gets you thinking about them, that's sufficient. All right. Sounds like we're running out of steam, huh?
It's good though. We talked about some good things.
Yeah, I think so. So get out there.
Yeah.
Let's do a lot of landscape work. Maybe not big landscapes. Remember intimate landscapes.
Okay. Thank you, Graham.
All right, folks.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Uh-huh.
Thanks very
Bye.
much.
Here, bye-bye.
You.